Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into the life and work of Claudius Ptolemy. He's this giant figure in the history of science, and we've got a really interesting mix of sources for this deep dive. We'll be looking at his scientific discoveries and also what little we actually know about his personal life.
It really is amazing. When you think about it, Ptolemy shaped Western thought for over 1,500 years, but we don't actually know that much about the man himself. It's like his impact is everywhere, but the details of his life, they're kind of missing.
It's like a puzzle with some pieces missing. What we do know is that he was born in Alexandria, Egypt, around 100 CE,
Hmm.
during the time of Roman rule. And he likely had Greek ancestry. His full name is actually Claudius Ptolemaeus, which even suggests that he may have been a Roman citizen. That in itself is really fascinating when you think about the multicultural environment of Roman Egypt back then.
Absolutely. And that mix of cultures, it probably influenced Ptolemy's work a lot because he was able to draw on all these different intellectual traditions, Greek, Egyptian, and Roman, and you can really see that in his most famous work, the Almagest.
Oh yeah, the Almagest, that's the one that put Earth at the center of the universe for centuries, right? It's interesting how that idea, I mean, everything revolves around us, how it was so widely accepted for so long.
It is interesting, but it's also a testament to how strong Ptolemy's model of the universe was. His geocentric model, where Earth is at the center and everything revolves around it, it was the dominant model for over 1,500 years. You have to ask, why was this idea so powerful for so long?
That's a great question. I mean, we obviously know now that it isn't accurate, but back then there must have been something about it that just made sense to people.
Oh, absolutely. One reason is that it matched up with what people observed every single day. You look up and you see the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. It does look like it's moving around us.
Right. From their perspective, it just made sense. Plus, they didn't have telescopes and the tools we have today to really get a different perspective.
Exactly. But there's more to it than that. Ptolemy also supported his model with detailed observations and mathematical calculations. And you have to remember, this was long before the scientific revolution and the tools that, we just take for granted today. He didn't just present a theory, he backed it up with data, which made it seem even more credible.
So it wasn't just a random idea. It was actually a pretty sophisticated theory based on what they knew at the time.
Exactly. And that's an important point. Ptolemy's geocentric model, it wasn't just some mistake. It was actually a huge scientific accomplishment for its time. It laid the groundwork for centuries of astronomical study.
It's a good reminder that science is a process.
Hmm.
We're always learning, always refining our understanding of the universe.
Absolutely. And what we believe is true at one time, well, later on, it may turn out to be incomplete or even wrong. But even those wrong ideas, they can push us forward. They make us ask new questions, search for better answers.
Right. It's like Ptolemy's model, even though it was eventually replaced, it helped pave the way for the heliocentric model,
Yeah.
the one with the sun at the center.
Exactly. His work gave future scientists a starting point, a foundation to build on. Kind of like how you need a strong foundation before you can build a skyscraper, you know what I mean? Ptolemy, he provided that foundation for astronomy.
It's not about being right or wrong. It's about how his work influenced the development of science as a whole.
Exactly. And his influence, it went way beyond just astronomy. He also did groundbreaking work in geography. He came up with innovative ways to create maps, and he even tried to map the entire known world.
Wow, mapping the world back then, that must have been a challenge. I mean, we have satellites and GPS and everything now. But Ptolemy, he had, what, a compass and a lot of guesswork.
Pretty much. But you know what? His work was revolutionary. He even tried to calculate the circumference of the Earth. He didn't get it exactly right, but just imagine trying to do that without any of the modern tools we have today.
You can really see the ingenuity and dedication in his work.
Absolutely. His maps, they weren't perfect, but they were incredibly valuable. Explorers used them, traders used them. They helped people understand the layout of the world and navigate it.
So, just like his model of the universe, his maps became a starting point for others to build on. They weren't perfect, but they were a foundation for cartography.
Exactly. And his work in geography was just as important as his work in astronomy. But that wasn't all. He also made significant contributions to the study of optics, how light behaves, and even music theory.
Wow, a true Renaissance man. But we've talked all about his achievements. What about the man himself? Did he have a family, friends, hobbies? Was there a favorite scroll he liked to read over and over? What do we know about Ptolemy's personal life?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting and maybe a little frustrating too. It seems like for all his achievements and influence, Ptolemy's personal life is really a mystery. We just don't have a lot to go on. Historical records about his family or, his upbringing or even his relationships, it's really scarce. It's almost as if his work just overshadowed everything else about him.
So he's like a rock star astronomer, leaving this huge legacy, but keeping his personal life very private.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but the lack of information, it might actually tell us something. You know? It could suggest that he was incredibly dedicated to his work, maybe even a bit obsessed. Can you picture him? Just spending endless hours in the Library of Alexandria, hunched over scrolls,
Yeah.
carefully observing the stars, working out all these complicated calculations.
Yeah, totally. Like he was so focused on understanding the universe that nothing else mattered. Almost like a mad scientist, but like in a good way, driven by this deep curiosity.
Exactly. And since we're talking about his work, we've touched on the Alma just a little bit. But it's worth digging a bit deeper because it's not just a record of Ptolemy's observations. It's more like a compilation of centuries of astronomical knowledge, like Greek and Islamic astronomy. It's all in there.
So it sounds like he was building on the knowledge that came before him, taking all that existing work and then like creating something even bigger and more complete.
Exactly. I mean, the Almagest, it was a masterpiece. Ptolemy, he cataloged over 1,000 stars in there, and he described the movements of the planets. And get this, he even laid out this whole intricate system to explain how those planets moved across the sky. He called them epicycles and deferents.
Epicycles and deferents. Those sound familiar. But could you remind me what those are again?
Oh, sure. Okay, so picture a planet moving across the sky. Now imagine that planet is also moving in a small circle. That small circle, that's the epicycle. But here's the thing, the center of that epicycle, it's also moving in a larger circle around the Earth. And that larger circle, that's called the deferent.
Wait, so it's like a circle moving on another bigger circle, like those spirograph toys, the ones that you use to make all those cool patterns.
That's actually a great analogy. And Ptolemy, he used this whole system of circles within circles, to make his geocentric model work, to make it match up with what people actually saw when they looked up at the sky. Because, if you really watch the planets, you'll notice that they don't move in perfect circles around the Earth. Sometimes they seem to go backwards or slow down.
So the epicycles and deferents, they were his way of explaining those weird movements.
Exactly. It was really clever, though pretty complicated, way to make his geocentric model fit the observations. And you know what? It actually worked pretty well for centuries. Like, they could actually use it to predict where the planets would be.
It's kind of mind-blowing that this model, with all its complexity, was the way people understood the universe for so long. It really shows you how much our understanding has changed.
It really does, and it's a great example of how science is always evolving,
Yeah.
building on what came before and always challenging those old ideas. And as new observations were made and new theories came along, eventually Ptolemy's model, well, it had to give way to the heliocentric model. That's the one we know today, with the sun at the center.
Right, the Copernican revolution. But it's important to remember that Ptolemy's model, even though it was wrong, it was still a huge step forward. I mean, it was the leading theory for centuries, and it gave future astronomers something to work with, to question, and ultimately to improve upon.
Absolutely. And don't forget, Ptolemy's influence wasn't limited to astronomy. Remember those incredible maps we were talking about? He was truly a pioneer in that field.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those maps, they must have been revolutionary. Try to imagine navigating the world back then without Google Maps or GPS.
I know, right? Think about all those sailors relying on his maps to find their way across huge oceans. Or all the merchants planning their trade routes. Ptolemy's maps, they literally shaped how people explored and interacted with the world.
And to create those maps, I mean, he had to figure out how to represent the Earth, which is round, on a flat surface, right? That's kind of like how we have different map projections today, each one showing the world in a slightly different way.
That's exactly right. He was dealing with that same, fundamental challenge, How do you accurately show a 3D object on a flat surface? And Ptolemy, he came up with solutions. His map projections, they were really influential. They formed the basis for a lot of the maps we still use today.
It's amazing how his work from so long ago is still relevant in some ways. It's like a connection across time.
You got it. Ptolemy's legacy, it isn't just about history. It's about understanding how we got to where we are now. He was tackling some of the biggest questions about the universe, about our place in the world. And his work, it still has meaning today.
It makes you think, with all that he achieved, what was it that drove him? What sparked his curiosity and what kept him going? I mean, he was clearly dedicated to his scientific pursuits. It's like we're looking at this incredible masterpiece painting, but we don't know anything about the artist. We can appreciate the skill, the technique, how it makes you feel, but there's something missing, that personal connection, that deeper understanding.
I see what you mean. And maybe that's part of what makes Ptolemy so fascinating. He left behind this amazing legacy of scientific discovery, but we don't really know his own story. I think it reminds us that knowledge and discovery, it's not just about facts and figures. It's about people, It's about the human stories behind the discoveries, the motivations, the challenges they faced, even those moments of brilliance that make us want to explore the unknown.
It's almost poetic in a way, right?
Yeah.
The man who tried to map the universe, he kind of becomes a mystery himself. His work is still with us, but his life, his personal life, it's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, it is. And that mystery just makes it even more interesting. If you want to learn more, find those missing pieces and try to put the puzzle together.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Ptolemy's life and work, what's the most important thing for our listeners to remember? What's the key takeaway from all of this? I mean, we're talking about a man who lived almost 2,000 years ago, but he still has so much to teach us.
I think the biggest takeaway is that scientific progress, it's not always this straight line, from point A to point B. It's more like a journey with twists and turns and maybe even some wrong turns along the way. Ptolemy's model, the geocentric model, yeah, it was wrong in the end, but it was a huge accomplishment for his time. It shaped scientific thinking for centuries, and it provided a foundation for later scientists to question and to improve upon.
It's a good reminder that even when we make mistakes, we can still be moving in the right direction.
Right.
Our mistakes, they can lead to new discoveries, and they can help us understand the world better. And even when our view of the universe changes completely, like it did when we shifted from a geocentric to a heliocentric model, the work of those who came before us, it still matters.
You said it. Ptolemy's work, it really shows us that progress is often built on the foundations that were laid by those who came before us. Even with limited tools and knowledge, we can still make huge contributions to science.
It makes you wonder, what would Ptolemy think if he could see how much we've learned about the universe since his time? Things like the vastness of space, black holes, the way galaxies work. I mean, it's mind-blowing.
I bet he'd be amazed. He spent his whole life trying to understand the cosmos. So to see how far we've come, it would be humbling, but also pretty exciting.
Maybe he'd even want to revise his own models. Take those new discoveries and come up with an even grander vision of the universe. Or maybe he'd just be proud, knowing that his work, even though it was replaced later on, helped spark that journey of scientific discovery.
It really is an amazing thought, that even after thousands of years, we're all connected by this desire to learn, this need to understand the universe and our place in it. Ptolemy's legacy, it's a reminder of that connection, and it inspires us to keep exploring, to keep asking those big questions, and to push the boundaries of what we know.
So we'll say goodbye to Claudius Ptolemy for now, but let's remember his curiosity, his dedication to science, and his amazing contribution to our understanding of the cosmos. And next time you look up at the night sky, maybe, just maybe, you'll feel his presence. Still out there among the stars, searching for answers to those age-old mysteries. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.